This one I just found out about, and I don't know how I just found out about this, because this feels like this should be a gigantic story, a major story. It kind of just whoosh, like, and the problem is there's so much going on right now, and I think that's part of the strategy, to just fill the space with so much noise so that stuff like this, once the details come out, the media doesn't focus on it. They're already on to the next scandal, and that early spin is all you need. And so do you guys remember the early spin? I'll show you the early spin. This is from March 16th. So I'm gonna give you, now that some time has passed, we know the period of events of how this happened. So the Trump administration announced that they was going to be using the Alien Enemies Act, which was enacted in, I don't know, 20 to 25 years after our nation's founding. So it's 1798, if I remember correctly. So quite a while ago, Mitch McConnell was, playing hacky sack around then. So, it's been quite a time. Anyway, it was enacted then in order to build up in an anticipation mass deportation campaign of the French. I know that's kind of weird to think about, but it was actually part of a larger collection of laws that were passed in order to deport the French and pressure the French, because there was a concern that there was this infiltration campaign to try to loop the United States into France's wars in Europe. It's not really as important anymore. Most of those laws were actually repealed because, we didn't end up getting dragged into any war with the French. The only thing that we ended up keeping was the Alien Enemies Act, even though we never used it against the French in that purpose. But we did end up using it at other times. Most notably, the one that you will probably know, is when we interned the Japanese. It wasn't just the Japanese, but mostly the Japanese during World War II, in order to try to, contain them, because we didn't believe in their loyalty. We thought maybe they'd be loyal to Japan. And there was this one instance where a Japanese pilot crash landed on an island that was controlled by the United States, where they were trying to get local Japanese people to join them, and one or two people did, and it created a huge fear campaign on top of existing racism, and it pushed the government to engage in a pretty horrific and repressive campaign against Japanese Americans, people who otherwise would have, largely speaking, been probably loyal to the United States, and probably would have even helped us in the war effort. In fact, there were Japanese Americans who did help us in the war effort. Putting all that aside, though, now it's being cited again. The problem is, though, that it's being cited in a time of peace, when the law clearly states that it can only be cited during a time of war, or, the United States territory is being infringed upon. I don't know, Mexico moves in and takes Texas, then we can start interning the Mexicans. Now, do I think that's a good idea? No, I think the law in and of itself is bad, outdated, that the rest of them were repealed shortly after being introduced for a reason. They were never even used for its original intention against the French, and the only major use of it that any of us can remember is one of America's great crimes. So its use in the first place, period, I think is bad, and normalizing its use, period, I think is bad. In fact, I would even say that after this administration, there should be work done to repeal the Alien Enemies Act to make sure that no future president can use it. Because even if we're at a time of war with another nation, I think just deporting every single foreign national, or certainly doing it in the way that the president seems to have the authority to do it, is wrong, because it's obviously being abused. Either way, here it's being used again, this time to deport Venezuelans to El Salvador. Now, these people, supposedly these 238 people, were announced as being members of a Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, very violent gang, very horrible gang that's done a lot of terrible, you could call them atrocities and brutalization of innocent people. And so these are a real problem that have to be dealt with. In the Trump administration says they've caught 238 of them, and they're going to use this Alien Enemies Act to deport them. Now, in its own process, through the normalization of the law, there's already a problem. But the thing is, again, we're also not at war. And this act has never been used against the gang in this way. What the Trump administration is basically saying is that this gang is like an invading army. It's like we're at war. We're now at war, kind of. And this gang is the invading army. And so now we can deport. It's a lot of flimsy legal logic to get to the step he was at, which was using an already flawed law, to put it lightly. And after making this announcement, and this is new, within 90 minutes of announcing this within the Trump administration, they had already started the deportation flights. They did it that quick, before judges could react, before the system could react. They kicked in the door and acted and deported these people before the system could react. And when the judges did react, and this has been known for a bit, and they said, stop, this is illegal, we're not at war with Venezuela or El Salvador, you can't deport these people to this foreign prison where with no trial, no due process, with no way for us to, make sure that these people are being treated well, because they will not be in our custody anymore. They're going to a pretty notorious prison in El Salvador after the president of El Salvador made an agreement with the United States to take these people. And they told them to turn the plane around, and they didn't. So they violated the law. And they continue ignoring a court order, saying that they didn't need to listen to the judge. They have the popular mandate to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically saying that they didn't need to listen to the court. They didn't need to listen to the judge. And let me tell you, these types of test cases is where the Trump administration can find out what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. When they are told that they can't violate the law and they can do it anyway and then get away with it. Because I think the Trump administration, whether or not this is the case, views that decision by the Supreme Court about criminal immunity while acting in the actions of the presidency and the office of the presidency to cover stuff like this, almost certainly. Now, it's not still clear exactly where those lines lie, but the Trump administration will certainly argue on its own behalf. So they deport these people anyway, these 238 people. And let me tell you, we were getting like no information on who these people are. And the judges say that still we don't have really any information or very little information on who these people are. And the judges are angry about it. They're pissed about it because not only was it illegal and they ignored the court order, but then they provided very little information about it. They didn't release the names of who these people were so people could go check them. They released really nothing. And now we're getting information, more information about exactly who got deported. And yes, there were members of the criminal gang, but you want to know what happens when there is no due process? You want to know what happens when there is no, checks and balances to come in and say, is this the right person? Is this person innocent? Is this person guilty? Do you want to know what happens when you rush the process in order to get past the courts? Well, when there's no due process, the people who deserve due process don't get it. And so now we're finding out that people are getting deported who were not gang members, who are not part of Tren de Aragua, not part of some Venezuelan gang, but they're getting deported for things as minimal as tattoos, mistaken gang tattoos, not tattoos that are part of the gang, they used to be part of it and they left it. No, tattoos that are getting mistaken as gang tattoos. Mistaken. Listen to this. In several sworn declarations, attorneys, relatives, and a former official for the Department of Homeland Security have pushed back on the Trump administration's deportation last weekend of Venezuelan migrants to a notorious prison in El Salvador. The declarations, which were filed overnight on Wednesday, detail how some migrants were detained and how they were transferred to detention facilities in Texas before being sent to El Salvador. The declarations also allege that many of the migrants do not have ties to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua or any criminal record. An official with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement acknowledged in sworn declarations earlier this week that many of the non-citizens under the Aliens Enemies Act did not have criminal records in the United States. When asked by ABC News about how authorities are determined if migrants are gang members, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said on Wednesday that the Trump administration is not going to reveal operational details about a counterterrorism operation. Okay, so we just don't know. We don't know who the people are. They won't release really any details on them. No due process, done very quickly, and they won't tell us how they identified that they're gang members. Michelle Sabrina Gonzalez, the sister of Ino Jose Sabria, who is believed to be in El Salvador, said in a sworn declaration that when she and her brother went to a routine ICE check-in 2 months ago as part of the asylum application process, officials did not allow her brother to leave. The officers asked me whether my brother belonged to a gang and about a tattoo that is visible on his hand. The tattoo on his left hand is on a rose with money as petals. Gonzalez said in his declaration that her brother is not affiliated with Trendy Aragua. In several declarations, attorneys described how their clients were placed on a plane for deportations but removed because of a temporary restraining order was issued before the plane departed. Attorney Stephanie Quintero said her client was told by an ICE agent, you all do not know how lucky you are. You all hit the lottery because you're not getting deported today. You know, by the way, these are the people who got lucky. They're saying, hey, there were some people they were about to deport that were completely innocent. And as they were rushing to push them on the plane, they said, oh, snap, Billy Bob's on the plane. We got to get Billy Bob off. Billy Bob's just like a gardener. Oh, Billy Bob's an accountant. Oh, my God. Oh, whoopsie daisy. Almost sent you to one of the most notorious prisons in South America, where they shave your head and line you up like cattle. Whoops. Whoopsie daisy. You know how bad it is if due process and justice, the only way you can get it is if you hit the lottery? If you think these types of crack and lack of due process will only be used, by the way, it's not good for it to be used against non-citizens. It's wrong, it's bad, they're human beings, they deserve some basic level of respect. We should not say in the United States that the law only applies to U.S. citizens. If you're not a U.S. citizen, at any point we can grab you, throw you out, beat you, abuse you, it doesn't matter. That's wrong. That's wrong. They're human beings, and this is a country that's supposed to be free. But if you don't think that these cracks are going to be used against U.S. citizens, not even when we're talking about deportations, even though I could see U.S. citizens trying to come back to the United States, them trying to turn somebody away at the border or finding some justification to do something. And with how many people have fallen through the cracks here, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up accidentally deporting U.S. citizens. There's been multiple instances of U.S. citizens and people legally here being picked up by ICE agents and being detained for days with their family confused. But if you think this is only going to affect one small group of people, these the whole thing, this cracks, people seep in, people fall in that wasn't intended. And let me just say, this is just the people that were saved. There were people who were not saved. The thing is, there are people who were still sent over. For example, there's one suspected case of a person who had a soccer tattoo. And the soccer tattoo was misidentified as a gang tattoo, and then he was deported all the way to El Salvador. Let me read you these documents because maybe it'll sink in how bad it is once you hear it in the legal speak. Once you hear this disgusting nonsense in the language of legalese, in the language of the pencil necks. Here it is. Here is a new sworn declaration. By the way, there's multiple of these. Here is one of them. Now, what's in this is, this was filed last night, and this is saying that the Trump administration sent these people over there, so it wasn't just people saved off the plane. And like I said, one of them was a professional soccer player who had a tattoo of Real Madrid, his soccer club. And I'm not a big football or soccer fan, but Real Madrid, I know the club. I've seen their logo. People wear it. I'm not completely, culturally defunct. But that tattoo was misidentified as a gang tattoo. And so he was deported to the prison in El Salvador with no due process, with no trial. And you want to know the other piece of evidence they had? Let me read this to you, so when you hear it, you can have the same shock that I had. I, Lieutenant Tobin, do hereby declare the following under the penalty of perjury. Remember all those, sworn affidavits that came out that the Trump administration would talk about all the time? Well, here we go. Under the penalty of perjury, I'm an immigration attorney for Reyner Barrero, born January 16, 1989 in Venezuela. In February and March 2024, he marched in 2 demonstrations in Venezuela protesting the authoritarian rule of Maduro. At the second demonstration, he was detained and taken into clandestine buildings where he was tortured, electric shocks, and suffocation, along with other demonstrators. And that's something I failed to mention here. And this is especially interesting considering Marco Rubio and other Republicans fought for people like this to remain in the United States. Because these were people who were tortured and abused by Maduro and fled to the United States for political asylum. And then what did we do? We deported them to one of the most notorious prisons in South America. We act like the regime they fled from. At the second demonstration, he was detained, tortured. Shortly after his release, he fled Venezuela for the United States. He registered with the CBP-1 in Mexico, then presented himself to Customs and Border Patrol officials on the day of his appointment. He was taken into custody and detained at the detention facility in September of 2024. So to be clear, this guy went straight to Customs and Border Patrol and said, hello, I want asylum. He didn't hide. He didn't go, hello, gang, take me across. I want to be smuggled. He fled to the United States and then turned himself over to the Customs and Border Patrol. We applied for asylum, withholding of removal, and cap protection in December of 2024. His final individual hearing is set for April 17th, 2025, before Judge Robinson. On March 15th, he was deported to El Salvador with no notice to counsel or family. His family wasn't told. He's just disappeared from the country, deported to one of the most notorious prisons in South America. Prison family doesn't know about it. Legal counsel doesn't know about it. It was not until March 18th, 3 days after disappearing off the face of the earth, that the council was able to reach an ICE official and learn that he had in fact been deported. Mr. Reyner Barrero was and is a professional soccer player in Venezuela. He has never been arrested or charged with a crime. He has a steady employment record as a soccer player, as well as a soccer coach for children and youth. Initially, he was placed in a maximum security at Otay Mesa and accused of being a Trendiagua gang member. The accused is based on 2 things. First, a tattoo on his arm of a crown sitting on top of a soccer ball with a rosary and the word Dios. This, again, Real Madrid. DHS alleges that this tattoo is proof of gang membership. In reality, he chose this tattoo because it is similar to the logo of his favorite soccer team, Real Madrid. See the logo before. Now, this next one threw me for a loop. If this can get him deported, don't think this administration is not incompetent enough to deport you. Second, DHS reviewed his social media posts and found a photo of Mr. Reyner Barrero making a hand gesture that they allege is a proof of gang membership. In fact, the gesture is a common one that means I love you in sign language and commonly used as a rock and roll symbol. You know what he's talking about? The rock on horns. This. He had a soccer tattoo and he did this with his hand. I mean, this is the type of stuff that gets me worried about. See, Dylan, you expected issues returning from Ukraine this time? The first time I returned from Ukraine, they made me take off my shirt and show them all my tattoos in order to see if any of them were associated with terrorist organizations. So this is a real thing, something that I've actually gone through. Now, I didn't have... I actually, I put all the makeup over my Al Nusra tattoo, so they didn't find it, and I was able to get through without a trace. So the point is, though, they do check. So I've gone through this experience. It's weird. It's aggravating. You don't really like it, but I mean, whatever. I don't want the country to be full of terrorists, so I do it. But I'm imagining, right? If that is enough to get him deported to El Salvador, I could come back to the United States. Be like, sir, you were to Ukraine. What's that tattoo? Is that assassinate the president? Oh God, you're going I'm not saying it's gonna happen. What I'm saying is, if that can happen to him, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. The point is the lack of due process. The point is to rush it. And when you have a lack of due process and you rush it, this is what happens. This is why we have innocent until proven guilty. This is why we have review of a jury of your peers. This is why we have a judiciary. This is why we're supposed to have an independent court system. Because we're not supposed to let political gamesmanship interfere with the justice system, which is what this is. This is Donald Trump wanting to look tough to the American people, deporting the gang members while also testing the lengths and the stretches of his authority once again, and stretching not only how he can use the Alien Enemies Act to deport people, but also see if he can ignore the court orders. But if you don't think that this type of incompetence when it comes to the deportation of like soccer players could end up hurting you, or when it comes to the administration of the FAA, or when it comes to the administration of Social Security, or Medicare, or Medicaid, or student loan debt relief. I mean, when we talk about cutting of the Department of Education, that executive order that was announced today, another unconstitutional executive order, since again, power of the purse lays with Congress. If they create a department, they're the ones that have to get rid of the department. But what does that mean for Pell Grants? What does that mean for student loan relief? What does that mean for the student loan payments that are skyrocketing right now across the country? These instances of not only authoritarianism, but incompetence are quickly spilling over to affecting everybody's everyday life. But these types of stuff, this type of abuse of people's individual rights and test cases, this takes time for it to travel down the system. And so it's a type of smoke before the fire situation. And you have to put it out quick. This is the type of stuff where people should be standing off the top of buildings screaming, fire, 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 fire. He ignored the courts. Because the legislature is not checking the president. It's controlled by the Republican Party, and they have subdued themselves to the presidency. The executive, of course, is controlled by Trump himself, and so the judiciary is supposed to be the branch that's doing a lot of the work. And so if he can just ignore the judiciary and deport innocent people to the most brutal prison systems in South America, what can he do to you? What else can he ignore the courts on? I mean, look, the courts do have more powers that we have yet to see exercised when it comes to their power of summons and their ability to go and detain people for that. And so it's not like the courts have completely fallen, but what I'm saying is he's testing the courts on issues like deporting innocent people back to countries with no due process, and he's not really at all concerned about the people falling through the cracks. I mean, remember, Marco Rubio came out and he advocated for these people who were deported from Venezuela. He said that we needed to save them because they were hurt and all this. And, this is part of his, foreign policy ideology. We would say that Marco Rubio is somebody who supposedly had some ideology around his foreign policy. And now he is helping the administration deport those people to prisons that Maduro would have liked to see them stay in. What a pathetic transformation. After submitting a police clearance from Venezuela indicating no criminal record, multiple employment letters, a declaration from the tattoo artist who rendered the tattoo, and various online images showing similar soccer ball crown tattoos explaining the meaning of the hand gesture, Mr. Reyner Barrero was transferred out of maximum security. Nevertheless, on March 10th or March 11th, he was transferred from Alta Mesa to Texas without notice. Then on March 15th, he was deported to El Salvador. Counsel and family have lost all contact with him and have no information regarding his whereabouts or conditions. This is from 2 days ago. They learned that his tattoo was soccer-based. They learned that this was I love you. They learned about his employment history and lack of criminal record before he was deported. You could not have given them enough warning. You could have gone out, you could have had protests outside there with his name and signs saying, look, dude, that you could not have given them enough warning. They knew, they were told. But because they rushed it, and because of the lack of experience in handling the bureaucracy, because of the lack of review, the lack of due process, a man who fled to America for freedom has now been lost in the maximum security system of El Salvador. And I keep talking about how brutal it is. And look, let me just show you the footage they showed of deporting all these people, including the innocent ones, to El Salvador, countries none of them have really, as far as I know, ever been to. And what they look at this footage. Here they are, all excited. This is filmed with so much fun. Look at the U.S. government in El Salvador working together to make good old propaganda videos with these people, their heads down, loaded into the trucks. They show the tattoos. They then haul them off into this. Well, look at that facility. His crime was protesting Maduro, by the way. That is why he fled to the United States. The reason he got sent over there is because of our incompetence, and he protested against the regime that Trump's own State Department tried to bring down. And oh yeah, this is important to note. They shave all your hair. They shave your beard. They shave your hair. And so this man, these innocent people were filmed with their heads being shaven and humiliated in these big facilities and lined up like cattle before being put up one behind the other, behind the other, behind the other, in big lines in the big facility, and then shuffled into the prison cells. Don't think it can't be you. Do you think this will make them do the Thriller Big Prison Dance Comp? Jesus.